All right, so diving in today, we're going deep on something pretty fundamental to, I think, all of us, the science of loneliness, the stress it brings, and how we can, try to build some well-being. And for this deep dive, we're going to use Loneliness, Stress, and Well-Being, A Helper's Guide by Pia Murphy and G.A. Kupchik.
Yeah, great book.
It's from 1992.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how relevant it still is, you know?
Absolutely.
The struggles people have with connecting, feeling alone, and what to do about it, it's like timeless, you know?
Yeah, it really digs into those mechanisms behind feeling lonely, not just like feeling sad, but like why it happens.
Right.
And more importantly, I think what you can actually do about it.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to try and break down today.
Yeah, so we're going to kind of distill some of the key elements here, understanding the social interactions, what are those needs we have, social needs, and how support plays a role. So let's get into it. So, when you think about it, like what do you gain from spending time with other people? I mean, it's more than just having someone to, watch TV with, right? Like the book starts off talking about some really fundamental things that you get from social interaction, that sense of attachment, to your loved ones, approval, that need for approval, how we compare ourselves to other people, practical help, learning, just so many things.
And it's amazing how these like intertwine and it kind of affect like your well-being as a whole. Like take approval, for instance.
Yeah.
It's not just like, oh, I want a compliment. It's like it ties to your self-esteem.
Yeah.
How you see yourself.
Right.
And even social comparison.
Yeah.
Which can be negative sometimes.
Yeah.
It's also how you figure out where you fit in, what the norms are.
Well, and that's what the book jumps right into, is social norms.
Right.
And it starts off with some classic psychology. I think this will be really interesting for people to kind of revisit. So Solomon Asch's conformity experiments back in the 1950s, remember those?
Yeah.
They had people looking at lines, judging the length, and even when it was obvious which one matched.
Yeah.
If everyone else picked the wrong one, people would go along with it.
A lot of them did. Yeah.
Just to like fit in. It's kind of crazy when you think about it.
Yeah, it is. About a third of the time, people deny their own perception. It shows you how strong that pull is, like to conform.
Yeah.
Like even when you see it differently.
Right.
And there was another study, Deutsch and Girard, they did a follow-up. And in this one, people could answer anonymously.
Okay.
And you know what? Conformity went way down.
Oh, wow.
So it wasn't that they like suddenly saw the lines differently.
Yeah.
It was that fear of standing out.
Right, right.
Looking different, that need to be accepted.
So it really is more about that social pressure than it is about actually changing your mind about what you're seeing.
Totally. Yeah.
And we learn those social norms from everywhere, right?
Yeah.
I mean, family, friends, work, online, and sometimes these different groups like have totally opposing ideas about what's expected.
Right.
Imagine like you're a teenager and your family's like, get good grades.
Yeah.
But your friends are like, don't study too much. Like, what do you do?
Right. It's this constant negotiation, like who are you going to go with?
Yeah.
And the book talks about like two main ways people deal with this.
Okay.
You either change to fit in with the main norm in that situation, or you find a way to justify not conforming.
Okay.
Like aligning with a group that does fit your views.
Right. So you find your tribe, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Like think about tattoos, right? Or piercings.
Yeah.
Years ago, that was like nonconformist.
Yeah.
Now it's pretty mainstream. It's a new norm.
Right. So what is this like? What does this all mean for you, like in your daily life? I think we can all relate to feeling different or like we don't fit in.
Yeah.
And that can be really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And the book talks about what happens when you can't comply with a norm. Not because you don't agree with it.
Right.
But just because of your circumstances, like say being unemployed.
Yeah.
You can't just snap your fingers and change that.
Oh.
And feeling outside the norm like that can really lead to feeling isolated and uncomfortable.
Yeah, and it ties into this idea of self-efficacy, which is, Albert Bandura's concept.
Okay.
It's about your belief in your ability to handle things,
Okay.
And when you feel lonely, a lot of times it implies this lack of like mastery over your social needs.
Okay.
And this can lead to what's called cognitive dissonance.
Okay.
This is Leon Festinger's idea.
All right. So for our listeners, cognitive dissonance, like break that down for us.
Okay. So It's basically that feeling of mental conflict.
Okay.
When your thoughts, beliefs, or values clash with your actions.
Correct.
Like the book gives the example of someone who knows smoking is bad,
Right.
but they keep smoking. So to deal with that conflict,
Yeah.
they might downplay the risks
Hmm.
or find ways to rationalize it,
Right.
make it okay in their head.
Okay. So how does loneliness fit into all of this?
Well, loneliness, it creates that dissonance because you have this need to connect,
Right.
but you're not.
You're not experiencing it.
Exactly. So you try to reconcile that in your mind.
Right.
And self-efficacy comes in because if you believe you can connect with others, you can handle social situations.
Right.
It helps buffer against those lonely feelings and the dissonance that comes with it.
Okay, so this makes a lot of sense. So the book really gets into like, okay, what is it that you actually gain from social interaction? That makes it so important, right?
Yeah.
And it outlines a few key psychological theories, and we've touched on a few of them already.
Yeah.
But there's attachment theory,
Yeah.
social comparison, the need for practical help, even learning theory.
It's like this whole web,
Yeah.
all interconnected.
Yeah. So let's start with attachment theory.
Yeah.
And you might know this from John Bowlby's work.
Yeah.
And we often think about attachment as like babies and caregivers.
Right.
Right. But and the book makes this point that babies, they form attachments with whoever provides care, not just the mother.
Consistent care.
Yeah.
Whoever's there.
But that need for that secure connection, it doesn't just go away as you get older.
Right.
huh?
It changes. It evolves.
It evolves,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So as kids grow, and become more independent, it's not that they don't need those secure relationships anymore. It's more that they develop this trust, this sense that those connections are still there for them.
Right.
Right. And there's a really powerful quote in the book from Vice. It's about an adult experiencing separation. And she says, "When my husband left, I had this panicky feeling which was out of proportion to what was really happening. I was afraid I was being abandoned. I couldn't shake the feeling."
Wow.
And that really speaks to that deep-seated need for attachment, even in adults.
Oh, absolutely. And studies on people who've experienced loss, it highlights that even more. Like people who lose a spouse, they often try to replace that attachment.
Right.
Sometimes relying more on their kids or quickly jumping into a new relationship.
Yeah.
And what's kind of striking is that this need, it can stick around even in unhealthy relationships.
Right.
Vice points out that even when marriages go bad, and love fades, that attachment, that bond, it often remains.
That's a powerful thing to think about.
Yeah.
Okay, so then there's the need for approval.
Yes.
And we mentioned that's tied to your self-esteem.
Right.
And the book cites Crown and Marlowe, who suggested that seeking approval is like a basic human drive to keep a positive view of yourself.
Yeah.
And there's research by Geekas that found that people with lower self-esteem, they tend to actively seek out approval from others.
Right.
So it's almost like we need that outside validation to feel good about ourselves.
Yeah. And it makes sense. I mean, think about it. Without that, your self-worth, it can take a hit.
Right.
And building on that, we have social comparison, another big idea from Festinger.
Okay.
You're always trying to understand the world.
Right.
Right? And one way you do that is by comparing your views, your abilities to others.
Right.
And if people agree with you, it validates you, makes you feel more secure.
Makes you feel like you're right.
Exactly.
This reminds me of that experiment, the smoke-filled room experiment.
Oh, yeah. Latene and Darley.
Yes.
A classic.
Where people were less likely to report the smoke if others in the room were acting like nothing was wrong.
Even with the room filling up,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
It's wild. It really shows you how powerful it is to like want to fit in with the group, even when your senses are telling you something different.
Yeah.
Right. And there's another one, Latane and Rodet,
Yeah.
where people were less likely to help someone who had fallen if others were around.
Right.
So it's like we look to others to define the situation, to tell us how to act.
Yeah, it's like we're wired for that social cue.
Yeah.
Like, what's everyone else doing? Okay, that's what I should do.
Right, exactly. So then we have the need for practical help. And the book talks about how like you often have this physiological response when you see someone suffering.
Yeah.
And this can make you want to help them.
Right, you feel it.
Yeah.
You want to do something.
Right. But then the book brings up this case, this very well-known case, the Kitty Genovese case,
Oh, yeah?
where, 38 neighbors witnessed a murder, but nobody called the police. So it seems like it goes against that idea of wanting to help others.
It does. And the book uses this case to kind of show like how complicated altruism is.
Right.
You know, like social comparison can actually stop you from acting.
Right.
Brown analyzed the case, and he suggested that maybe the neighbors thought someone else had already called.
Okay.
And when the police didn't show up right away, they figured, oh, maybe it's not that bad.
Right.
And there's other factors too, you know, like when there's a lot of people, you feel less responsible.
Right. Diffusion of responsibility.
Exactly. But the book also says that in closer relationships, you know, that urge to help, it's stronger.
Right.
Because you know the person needs it.
Right.
And you value their approval.
Right. Right. Okay, so lastly, in terms of like what you gain from social interaction, there's learning theory.
Yeah.
And this one might be a little less obvious.
Yeah, it's not as direct.
Right. So explain this to us.
Okay, so basically like classical conditioning, you know, Pavlov's dogs, it says that things that happen together, they get linked in your mind.
Okay.
So like when you're a kid, your parents take care of you, comfort you.
Right.
So being around people, it gets associated with good feelings.
Okay.
And when you get hurt, they help you feel better.
Right.
So they're associated with removing pain and fear.
Okay. That makes sense.
And this learning, it shapes why you seek out company.
Right.
It's for that sense of security.
Okay, so that's a really good breakdown for our listeners of why we're just kind of wired, you know, for connection, for wanting to be around other people. Okay, so the book goes on to make this distinction between primary and secondary social needs.
Yes.
So what's the difference there? Like, what should people understand about that?
This is important because it explains why you might feel lonely even if you have people in your life.
Okay.
Primary needs, those are like your core needs.
Okay.
Self-esteem, security.
Right.
Secondary needs, those are things that help you meet those primary needs.
Oh.
So like feeling like you compare favorably to others.
Right.
That's a secondary need that helps your self-esteem.
Okay.
Getting approval from people you care about.
Right.
Same thing. Boosts self-esteem.
Okay. So you can have social interaction, but it might not be the right kind, basically.
Yeah, it's like you can have the social contact, but if it's not feeding those deeper needs, it's not going to help the loneliness.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and the book gives us an example of university students.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people will relate to this.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you've got students who are like high achievers in high school.
Right.
Top of their class, used to that positive comparison.
Yes.
Right.
Feeds their self-esteem.
Yeah, but then they get to uni and everybody's smart.
Exactly. Everyone's at the same level.
Yeah.
So that boost to their self-esteem, it's gone.
Right.
And they've also lost, you know, that constant approval they got from their family.
Right. Back home.
So their self-esteem is like under attack from all sides.
Yeah.
So to make up for it, they might like work extra hard to try to get back on top.
Right.
And they might isolate themselves doing that.
That they're trying to address that one secondary need, the social comparison.
Right.
But they're neglecting others, like companionship, belonging.
Exactly. And those also feed self-esteem and other needs like security.
Right. So they're almost making it worse.
Yeah, it's like this weird paradox.
Yeah.
They're surrounded by people, but they're lonelier.
Because they're so focused on that one thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So the book suggests then a two-step approach. First, you figure out like which primary needs are being met.
Right.
And then like what secondary needs can you use to address that?
Yeah. Figure out what's missing and then see what tools you have to fix it.
Right.
But it's important to remember that everyone's different.
Right.
You know, not everyone has the same needs, and what works for one person might not work for another.
Right.
And this brings us to Weiss's 6 provisions of social relationships.
Yes. This seems like a really good framework for people to use, to think about, like, what do healthy relationships, what do they provide?
Right.
So what are those 6 provisions?
So there's attachment, that feeling of security, connection, social integration, feeling like you belong to a group, opportunity for nurturance, that feeling of being needed,
Okay.
reassurance of worth, feeling valued,
Okay.
sense of reliable alliance, knowing you have people you can count on,
Yeah.
and getting guidance, having someone you can turn to for advice.
Okay, so those are like all really key elements.
Yeah.
Right.
But as the book points out, like how much people value these and how they express them, it's different across cultures.
Oh, yeah, totally. Like take nurturance.
Okay.
In a lot of Western cultures, it's like huge.
Right.
But Levy did research in Tahiti,
Okay.
and there they give babies away at birth as a sign of friendship.
Oh, wow.
They don't encourage dependency. It's the opposite.
Yeah.
And then you have Norway,
Right.
Middleford. And Middleford observed that Norwegians don't like to burden friends with their problems.
Right.
Loyalty, shared activities, those are more important than like deep emotional stuff.
No, so it's not just like totally different cultures either. Like even between, say, Britain and America,
Yeah,
similar societies, but there are differences.
right. Like Murphy and his colleagues, they found that British people, they care more about their image as a spouse
Okay.
and how their kids adjust.
Interesting.
That didn't come up as much in the American sample.
Okay.
And the book even talks about how kids raised as the wrong sex,
Mm-hmm.
they can learn the needs of the gender they're raised as.
Wow.
So it shows that these needs, they're not all just inborn.
Right.
They're adaptable.
They're shaped by your experience.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay. So it's really complicated,
Oh, yeah.
It's universal needs, but then like filtered through your culture, your experiences.
Your own lens.
Yeah. Okay, so this brings us to social support.
Right.
And the book, it talks about this in the context of dealing with stressful events.
Yeah, like those big life changes,
Yeah.
job loss, marriage, health issues,
Right.
they all affect your well-being.
Yeah, both physically and mentally.
Exactly. And the question is, why do some people handle it better than others?
Right.
And Hinkle and Wolf, their work showed that relationships, they play a big role.
Okay.
Like they could protect you from the worst effects of stress.
Okay.
And then Cassell took it further and said, look, it's the support within those relationships that matters.
Okay, so then a bunch of different models of social support came out of that, right?
Yeah, they try to explain how it works.
Okay.
And the book talks about 4 main ones.
All right, so let's start with the buffer hypothesis.
Okay, so this one says that your support system, it acts like a shield.
Okay.
It protects you from the bad stuff. And Kaplan, he laid out 6 ways this could happen. Like helping you change the situation, see things more clearly, feel less threatened, even changing your brain chemistry.
So for example, like if you lose your job, your network might help you find a new one.
Exactly. Or give you emotional support so you don't like spiral.
Right, right. But the book says this doesn't always work, right?
Yeah, there are limits, like really huge life events,
Oh, okay.
like losing a spouse.
Yeah.
The grief can be so overwhelming, even the best support might not be enough.
Right, right. So that leads to the direct effect hypothesis.
Right.
So what's the main idea there?
This one says that support has a direct positive impact on you.
Okay.
No matter what's going on in your life.
Okay.
So even if you're not going through something big, having good relationships, it just makes you feel better overall.
Okay.
And there's research to back this up. Ten and Bevington, they found that support directly impacts well-being. And Antonucci and Deppner, they showed that just interacting with people regularly, it leads to more life satisfaction.
Okay.
And get this, studies have even shown that your well-being is tied to your level of support, even when you take out major life events.
Wow.
So it's not just about cushioning the blow.
Right.
It's about having that consistent positive influence in your life.
Okay, that makes sense. So then the book gets into social norms and social resources.
Yes.
How do those fit into all of this?
So social norms, they shape how available and how effective your resources are.
Okay.
So there's these unspoken rules, right?
Right.
They dictate what's okay, what's preferred.
Right.
And then there's the rules about how you treat people who don't follow those norms.
Right.
Like if someone breaks the rules about relationships, they might get treated differently.
Right. Right.
And going against those norms, it can hurt your self-esteem.
Right.
And it can make people less likely to want to hang out with you.
Right.
So you lose those resources.
So it's like wanting to fit in, it's kind of this ongoing need that you're always dealing with.
Yeah, it's always there in the background.
Yeah. Okay, the book introduces this thing called the MSW loneliness scale.
Right.
So what's that all about?
It's a way to measure what they call social environmental adequacy.
Okay.
It's a questionnaire that looks at how satisfied you are with your relationships.
Okay.
Different sections for different types of relationships like partners, friends, kids, parents.
Right.
And for each question, you can answer yes, maybe no.
Okay.
So that gives you like a more detailed picture.
So it's not just do you feel lonely, it's like where are the gaps?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So finally the book talks about like how do you actually deal with loneliness?
Right.
And they give 3 levels of intervention.
Yeah.
So let's go through those.
Okay, so the first one is about improving your social skills.
Okay.
So like being able to talk to people comfortably,
Right.
understanding body language.
Sec-
The second level, that's about your basic needs.
Yeah.
Figuring out which ones are not being met because of your loneliness,
Right.
like attachment, reassurance, integration.
Okay.
And the third level, that's all about your thought processes.
Okay.
So finding and changing any negative thought patterns that might be making the loneliness worse.
So it's pretty comprehensive.
Yeah.
It recognizes that loneliness, it comes from lots of different places.
Right.
So there's not just one solution.
Exactly. Different tools for different problems.
Yeah. And the book highlights some counseling skills that can be helpful too.
Yes. Things like listening, really listening to what someone's saying.
Right.
Empathy, actually understanding how they feel and showing them you get it.
Right.
And understanding the rules of how people interact.
Right.
Those unspoken rules.
Right. The social norms that we talked about earlier. Yeah. So this has been a really interesting deep dive into loneliness, stress, and well-being. Thanks to Loneliness, Stress, and Well-Being,
Yeah.
A Helper's Guide. And I think it's clear, loneliness is really complicated.
Oh.
It's not simple.
No.
It's influenced by so many things.
Yeah.
Social norms, your beliefs, your culture, the support you have.
All of it.
Yeah. And the key takeaways here, I think, are that social interaction, it gives you these essential things:
Right.
attachment, approval, help when you need it,
Right.
learning. And support, it's not just a nice thing to have.
No.
It actually protects you from stress,
Yeah.
and it makes you feel better overall.
It really does.
So to leave you with a final thought, our society, it puts so much emphasis on being an individual,
Right.
right? And we're maybe moving away from those traditional communities.
Mhm.
Are we actually creating a culture where people feel lonelier?
That's a really good question.
It's something to think about for sure. Well, thanks for taking the deep dive with us.
My pleasure.
We'll see you next time.